Been a hot minute since we have been behind the mics and in front of your screens here. You get to see our beautiful mugs back on the screen on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. And unfortunately, we are talking about yet another heartbreaking loss for the Cincinnati Bengals, this time at the hands of the Chargers. We saw a little bit of everything in this game in Los Angeles. Some good, some bad, some ugly. And we're going to talk about that, what's ahead. I guess what's ahead in 2024, if there even is a 2024 left to kind of dissect at this point, with the Bengals being 4-7. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He is John Sheeran. John, it's been a hot minute since you and I got to yak about the Bengals here, and I guess it's kind of for a little bit of a good reason, but good to be with you. And we're dissecting a fun game in a lot of respects, but one that is just cut you to the core.
I mean, yeah, we haven't been on since before the Ravens game on Thursday Night Football, and a lot of similar tropes from that game kind of etched into this one. It's the same things, man. It's just they're 1-6 in one-score games this year, and all of them have very similar themes. And I guess we should have known that a matchup between the Bengals and Chargers would be complete mayhem, because both teams have their own verbiage about chargering or bungling, and we saw both of them happen in a span of, it was a pretty long game. I mean, you were there. It was almost like a 4-hour game, it kind of felt like, and it took a while. And it just got to the point where it just felt like neither team wanted to win, and the Bengals let one too many opportunities fall through their fingers. And you just said, man, 4-7. If you had told me that this team would be 4-7 with Joe Burrow playing like this, it's crazy. It's like the calculus is not that tough in my mind to just kind of decipher what is happening right now. But here we are. We have to do it.
Here we are. We're going to talk about that. This is the Orange and Black Insider, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel, which is part of the National Believe Network. We're happy to be with them, the BLEAV Believe Network, and you can get that through your favorite audio streamer. You got to resubscribe to the Believe in Cincy podcast channel if you were previously subscribed to our old channel. Please do that. It's our show, 3 and Out, with Jason and Kevin, talking football with Bengal Jim and friends. I did get to see Mr. Bengal Jim, always hospitable, great guy. Got to see him this weekend, and so that was a lot of fun. But they are on the podcast channel as well as the coach Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz, and Matt and Willie No Ball breaking things down. So we've got a number of shows for you that we try and get you a lot of content throughout the week. Hopefully you enjoy that. Subscribe through your favorite audio streamer. Give us a review if you like that. If you like the video side of things, like I said, we've got 2 beautiful mugs here for you to check out on the regular. So if you like to do that, you can get that through our YouTube channel underneath John Sheeran, and that Cincy Jungle icon, bottom right corner. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, do the bell thing, do the thumbs up, all that kind of stuff if you like what we're doing. And then, of course, through the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, we stream there, and we do through Twitter, or I guess X.com with the it becomes a space, I believe, at that point. I'm not the tech guy. But regardless, we're streaming a lot of different places, and hopefully you enjoy the content that not only we bring, but the rest of the Believe in Cincy folks bring you on the regular. Let's just break this down. That first half was atrocious. And there are nuances that we're going to discuss. I mean, that we've got the Bengals' latest meltdown. What happened and what needs to happen going forward and all this kind of stuff. We'll talk about that, coaching changes or not, that sort of thing. I mean, there's a lot here. That first half was atrocious. And look, I guess I'll just get a somewhat hot take out of the way. And I'm not a hot take guy, you know that, but Joe Burrow's playing an MVP level. There's no doubt about it. And the crosshairs, rightfully so, are on Evan McPherson this week, but you still relied on him a number of times, 4 in total, right? Two makes early, 2 misses late. You're not getting it done in the red zone. You're not getting it done as you get closer to that scoring area. And that's not on Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is playing at, like I said, at an MVP level, but still there are nuances to that where you go, man, why are you settling for 4 field goals in this game? I know the Chargers defense is good. I know that's a good team, but if we're going to kind of dissect a lot of things, you got to look at different areas. That to me is where you go, okay, let's just say Evan McPherson is off. Let's say he's not having the best year for him. Why are you settling for 4 field goals? What is going on in the playbook? What is going on in the execution area where you're not able to punch it in? You're not able to go for the throat a bit more. And there's a lot to this. And everybody's going to point to the defense. Everybody's going to point to Evan McPherson. I get it. Still, this has been an issue since 2021 and the postseason of 2021, the settling for field goals, not getting touchdowns, and it has continued to carry over to a large degree still this season. Not blaming Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is not to blame. I want to put that out there, but that is one facet that immediately sticks out to me when you go, okay, if you're gonna nail Evan McPherson for his misses that he should make, what's going on with the offense where you have to settle for 4 field goals?
Yeah, and part of that was, I mean, the Chargers were firing in all cylinders. Herbert was playing out of his mind in the first half. That's why they scored 24 points. And when you are struggling in the red zone and you don't know how many times you're going to be able to get there, with the Chargers defense being a really good unit, a unit that has flown under the radar because they've played some bad offenses and whatnot. But, you know, they were penetrating the Bengals offensive line pretty consistently, and it was making Burrow's life really tough. So when you had those opportunities to finish and you don't, or you settle for field goals, it makes the process look bad because you're lacking the awareness of what's happening in the game. And field goals are not going to put you in a situation where you can be competitive outside of an unlikely 21-point comeback, which somehow happened in the second half. And we can talk about that, but like still, like it was a total meltdown in the first half, and the defense is, I think, mostly to blame for that. But yeah, you're right. Like there's still these inconsistencies in offense in terms of just finishing drives. It was back-to-back red zone trips where they got within like the 5-yard line and they moved backwards both times, and somehow they managed to recover and got Jamar Chase in the end zone for a touchdown. But the miscues of just being laid out of the huddle and forcing to call these timeouts and these illegal motions and Tanner Hudson's involvement, it's just it all adds up, and it's not anything different than what we've kind of seen. So I would agree that if you were going to put some portion of the blame on the offense, it's that lack of ability to finish, and then that lack of aggressiveness towards actually going for it instead of just settling for field goals. And maybe there's the point of trying to get Evan McPherson some confidence and try to just build something up for him. And we saw how that just didn't work when they needed him to make the kicks that mattered.
It's, I mean, if you look at this team and who they've been, how far they've gone, and by whom, Evan McPherson has been a huge part of that, right? I mean, you go to the playoff runs and perfect in the playoffs that one year. I mean, just impeccable. And the fall from grace from him. And I there are a number of theories floating out there as to why he is struggling the way he is struggling. Right. I mean, it's just, you can only count on 50+ yard field goals so many times throughout a season. I get it. Maybe the round robin of holders and because of the punting situation over the past couple of years, maybe that's been an issue. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. And then, like you said, there is an innate issue with, and forgive me, I can't remember who pointed it out on Twitter, but an innate issue of late out of the huddle, under the gun, and there is you're a golfer, John. There is a And you're a much better one than I, by the way, from what I understand. We still have to play. We got to play around, but I don't think you want to watch me golf. But regardless, you're a pretty dang good golfer, and when you are, there's a similar, not the same, but a similar aspect to kicking. It's set up. There's a stationary ball, and sometimes when you overthink, when there's too much time or what have you, you can overswing. You can. When there is this theory that's kind of developing that now you're laid out of the huddle, maybe the constant trio that you have or that you had a while back, now that there's all these changes, maybe that's an issue. I don't know, but it's not working. The kicker is not looking the same. Again, I don't want to what I was saying about the red zone issues, I don't want to make that sound like a Burrow issue, because he is playing Superman type of ball. But even he is not immune to the lack of clutch moments by this team. And it's the defense not stepping up for one last stop. It's Burrow barely missing Jamar Chase down the sideline after they've been connecting on multiple touchdowns in one particular game, and he's played hero ball to get him back in a game that the defense allowed them to let things avalanche. It's the offensive line. There is just, and I think someone here, let me pull this up. I think it was Keith Evans, who was watching from the Bahamas, by the way. I got to pull up the comment. Regardless, it.
Uh-oh. He was so flabbergasted, I think he lagged out. Not good.
That's what I get for trying to scroll around there. It's the waiting for that other shoe to drop moment, right? It's that mentality now that, oh man, what happened? What's going to happen? The Bengals are making this comeback. How are they going to screw it up? And for the first time, really in the Joe Burrow era, I mean, 2020 notwithstanding, I know he's injured and all that kind of stuff, but for the first time, it feels like this is the season where you go, they got a lead. How are they going to screw it up? And I know how we got here in a lot of ways, but I also don't know how we got here in a lot of ways. Again.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, let's go there, because I wanted to eventually get there. The first half felt like pre-Zach Taylor Bengals. It's just what it was, because people who have followed this team for longer than just Joe Burrow has been here, they know all about past primetime failures and how they just never showed up for the important games. It wasn't just primetime. It was just any type of game where the stakes were high.
Profile. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
It looked exactly like those times. And only this time, it wasn't the quarterback, peeing down his pants and making terrible decisions. It was the quarterback, once again, having to be absolutely perfect with no margin of error. And if he wasn't, then they would fall short, which is what happened in this game. You had Burrow taking hit after hit, comical hits. He looked like a ragdoll out there at times, and he was pushing the ball down the field with all his might and doing everything. And when he was a bit too long for Jamar Chase, when he was a bit too late on some of those other balls, and when they couldn't get Evan McPherson closer on one of those final drives and led to another miss beyond 50 yards, they lost. And the lack of the entire team not being able to pick up from where he's leaving and what he's doing and not matching the contributions that he's giving, it ends up not being enough. And that's why he's on an absolute tear in 7 losses. Like, his production in these 7 games that they've lost, 6 of them have been by 1 score. It's inexcusable that he has to be A++ for the team to have a shot. And that's what makes it different, I think, compared to those past, the pre-Zach Taylor days. But like you said, man, and you've been hinting at this for a while now this season, when they were good in the past couple of years and when they were making playoff runs, they would always step up in these moments. And there was a confidence. There was an awareness that like they had the ability to do this, and there's no fear about what is going to happen if it goes wrong. And that's completely evaporated now. And that's a reflection, I think, on the culture, if you want to put it at that. And it's a reflection on a lack of belief in where the direction of this is. It's the entire process is now being put under the microscope. If it doesn't work anymore, how do you reinstill that belief? I don't know if you can, if the team isn't good enough to match what the quarterback is doing. And that's why we're at this point now where there's nothing he can say, Zach Taylor can say about this team is close, this team is good enough to compete. You're not, dude. You have a 20-something% chance to make the playoffs. You're 3 games under 500. Typically, one-score losses are not necessarily like indicative of, like, it's typically a lot of bad luck. It's not necessarily bad luck anymore if it happens so consistently. That just is what it is. You are who you are at that point, and that's why there's nothing more that he can say about the culture that's been established and everything that's been put towards this. It's been 6 years, and at this point, the well has run dry. And you just look at what Burrow, how he's reacting to all this, and how he's just clearly dejected because he's doing everything in his power to will them to victory, and he's getting absolutely no help from it.
We've gone from how are they going? What wacky way are they going to pull out this win? We've gone from that to how are they going to screw this up? That's the difference between 2021, 2022, and 2024. That's the major difference, and that's the feeling. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I feel like that is the prevailing feeling this year. You said it succinctly and very well said about, basically he has to be absolutely perfect, and he has been not perfect, but pretty dang close. I mean, he has been pretty dang close to perfect, despite all of the things going on around him, and some of the body language after a loss like that. You just the Bengals may do their Bengal thing where they rally and get some late season wins that may or may not mean anything. We've seen that largely through the Marvin Lewis era, largely through the other, John Kitna, Achilles Smith days where, and that's why we keep the coach around, because again, I'm not fire this guy, fire that guy, but at some point right now, Zach Taylor has, yesterday, said, basically we're not in panic mode. Wholesale changes are indicative of panicking, and we're not about that. That's not where we're at. And I'm paraphrasing, of course. I don't have the exact quotes, but regardless, I think people can look at this team and say, how can you not, even if it is just to make, quote unquote, make a statement. In sports, you kind of do that kind of stuff, particularly at the professional level. You see in baseball where the manager goes out and, really gets in the umpire's face type of thing. Really is, and they call that's kind of the morale boost to show, oh, the manager's got my back for a bad call, that sort of thing. I mean, sometimes there has to be a scapegoat of some kind. And as you and I discussed before we went on the air, the bye week is sometimes the apropos time to do that. And it appears that there is not going to do that unless their hand is forced, a la Cam Taylor-Britt not playing well, DJ Turner being injured. We'll talk more about that later. They're content. It appears that they are content with where they are, and they're saying, well, and you're this guy, John, the regression to the mean, those one score games, those couple of point game differences, those will finally tip back in our favor just because we like who we have on hand. That's not good enough. It's not good enough.
No. And it was very apparent yesterday when you had Jermaine Pratt kind of losing his cool at Taylor-Britt on the sidelines, Trey Hendrickson losing his cool at Zach Taylor, the continued juxtaposition of the demeanors of both Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase compared to Zach Taylor. The players are feeling that this is not good enough and this is unacceptable. And the leadership, at least from the coaching staff, on the surface, at the very least, it doesn't match that. And I think that is what is kind of exacerbating a lot of the concerns and the frustrations with the players. Like every time Jamar Chase speaks now, he just tears more and more towards like pretty open
apathy.
Criticism. Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. And that's, again, we don't know exactly what goes on in that locker room, but all that we can infer from it is that there's just a clear disconnect between what the players think of this team and what Taylor and the coaches think of it. And obviously Taylor's the spokesman of the staff, of the entire football operation, and his whole demeanor hasn't really changed. It's just been, we're close, we have the pieces here, we just got to find a way to do it. And when you continue to fail finding a way to do it, your words don't carry any weight anymore. And that's why, again, it's so tough for me to sit here and say that he's lost the locker room for 100% fact.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's still conjecture, but all that we can go off of is what we see and what we hear. And there were so many signs that pointed to that last night. And it really did feel like at the end of the first half, if they didn't come out of the gate like they did, it really did feel like it was a prime opportunity, I think, for changes to be made, at least on the defensive side of the ball. I look back 6 years ago, Terrell Austin was fired, I believe, around the same time of the year in 2018.
Bye week.
After he gave up on, I think it was like 51 points to the New Orleans Saints a week after the bye week or whatever. So like they didn't even wait around at that point. And yeah, like obviously the Chargers are on pace for something very similar in an embarrassing performance when your season was on the line, and somehow the defense rallied and was able to, force that fumble on Herbert, and the offense was able to match it. And I really did feel like that second half probably saved Anarumo's job, if I'm being completely honest, because at this point, like that's one of the biggest consistencies with this team is that they cannot hold teams under 30 points in these games, and the offense has to be absolutely perfect, or otherwise you lose a high-scoring shootout. And the same thing happened again. So it's this very clear disconnect between the players' frustration about a lack of change and a lack of evolution and a lack of leadership, and the coaching staff is being just keeping the status quo. It's not sustainable.
So we have a super chat here. We have had a couple from Mr. Whisper, and thankfully we've number one, thank you for the super chats. Very generous of you. But we've kind of touched on these subjects that he has asked, and to me, there is a fine line between them, but there is also a time and place for both of them, and that is composure when publicly addressing either the media, the fans, what have you, and fire frustration. Also, I think Mike Tomlin, say what you want about the Steelers, I think Mike Tomlin does a superb job with that. I think he has a composed fire a lot of times, and when his team is not playing well, he publicly says it. Sometimes he will even more or less call out specific players on some things. Maybe that's not always the best way, but the Steelers are a top-notch organization. We're going to talk about some stuff on that in just a second. The Steelers are a top-notch organization, whether you want to admit it or not, if you're a Bengals fan. And there exudes a fire in the belly type of thing with John Harbaugh, with Mike Tomlin. I'm not saying it's not there with Zach Taylor. It's more of a patience, ride out the storm. Things will get better. We're confident in who we are. And there is validity in that. There's validity in that because the Bengals in years past were able to do that. They were able to ride out the storm. They were able to ride out bad performances, be it by Burrow or whomever. That's not happening this year. It's just not. Your best players from those runs, Burrow and Chase not really withstanding, but some of your best players from those runs are not stepping up to the plate. The defense is not stepping up to the plate. And so now you have a 4-7 record. Now you've got questions on coaching. I'm seeing other questions about, do you think Zach Taylor lasts the year if this continues, that sort of thing. I don't think a head coaching change is going to commence personally throughout this year. I think there's going to be other scapegoats, like towards the end of Marvin Lewis's tenure. You mentioned Terrell Austin, who, by the way, goes to the Steelers and creates a great defense for them. And so you go, okay, what's the disconnect here? What is the Bengals difference, John Sheeran? And I say this because this same weekend, the Ravens and the Steelers played, and it was classic. What was it? 18-16.
No touchdowns for the winners.
Ugly win. Ugly game. But those are two benchmark franchises. And oh, by the way, they just happen to be in the Bengals division that comprise 4 of their 17 games on the season. I look at this, and I had a conversation. I told you this story before we took the air. You know, I went to this game, as you know, and it was you know, I before the game, I was actually at our hotel. There was a restaurant. It was kind of a rooftop bar, and I was with my family, and my son was able to watch football and watch the Plains, which he loved, and it was awesome. And there was this nice couple next to us. We didn't really engage all that much, other than my son probably bugging him by running around the table and all that kind of stuff. And um, towards the end, before we were getting going to the game, the gentleman said, "Hey, are you Anthony from Cincy Jungle?" And I was like, "Yeah, wow." You know, he was very complimentary of our work, and I don't say that to pat myself on the back. I just sometimes get blown away that people actually care about what we do, as you know. Complimentary of you, complimentary of the site, complimentary of the show, all that kind of stuff. His name's Mike, and we just had a discussion about the team and the game, and oh man, they need this one, and all this kind of stuff. And I just kind of bluntly said, and maybe it's been said a lot by other folks too, but teams like the Steelers and the Ravens, of course, they focus on getting a quarterback, as all teams do, but they build inside out, and the Bengals seemingly build outside in, meaning they prioritize different elements of their football team. And that is why you see 18-16 results. That is why you see immense defenses and offensive lines, largely from the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that is why you see paramount successes from both of those franchises. In the Bengals, while they've had immense talented quarterbacks, wide receivers, and other skill position players, they tend to focus on those spots and or luck into very good players at those positions via draft purposes. And it's a little bit of a house of cards. And so when I look at the Bengals, this year has taught me once again, despite what happened in 21, despite what happened in 22, that once again, there are major shortcomings. And I'm sure everybody's going, duh, Anthony, we know that now, but it's just painfully obvious that they're playing with an innate handicap, really, as comparative to other teams, the way they operate.
That's all it is. I mean, I brought up Anarumo as someone who I think is on the hot seat, and I think of all the Bengals issues, like the defense is obviously one of them, and that may be the only change that is made this year, but it's not going to be the thing that saves them. It's not going to be the one thing that all of a sudden makes all their problems go away. Everyone knows it's an ownership thing. Everyone knows it's a front office thing. That's the biggest difference between the Steelers, Bengals, and Ravens, and how both those teams, who are always typically the class of the division, they end up, regardless of this, the overall state of the roster, like their structure and their organizational flow is just hands down better, and it's more sustainable, and it doesn't rely on necessarily just getting lucky. And there's a clear emphasis on what to prioritize when you're talking about the draft. There's a clear prioritization about retaining your best players at all costs. The Steelers used to be like the Bengals, in which they didn't really believe in a lot of guaranteed money in their contracts, and then they evolved because they had to. And the Bengals haven't made that evolution yet. That's never been a problem with the Ravens. They're always aggressive in terms of maximizing the salary cap and maximizing the trade deadline. Both those teams have ownership that kind of gets out of the way and lets the football minds get to work, and the Bengals don't have that. And that's ultimately what's going to make it harder for the Bengals to do what they need to do, which is why the Bengals need to hit on everything else to make sure that they get into a position like it was in 2021, when everything just was hitting and everything was coming together. And that's why the Steelers and Ravens could just sit back and say, something we can do when they're just popping off like this. And all of their decisions end up becoming true. And that's not been the case over the past 2 years. It's why it's more sustainable for the Steelers and Ravens to have the success that they do. And I think the team building philosophy, like you said, it makes sense too. Like both of those teams have always prioritized interior offensive line play more than the Bengals. And that's only been slightly different in recent years, but the prioritization about the actual attributes that matter, that's still a long ways away. It's everything that adds up like that. And when you have guys like Tomlin and Harbaugh, like they've lasted that long because their style of coaching meshes with how those teams build those rosters, and the sustainability factor into which they build those rosters, it's more of a solid process than what the Bengals have, where they have to just strike lightning in a bottle, and that's what they almost did a few years ago. And you can just see how tough it is for them to get back there when they have a hand tied behind their back because they don't operate like other teams.
What's frustrating again is when you look at what they could have done this year, be it trade deadline, be it, and we'll talk about injuries too, because there's a big one with a guy who started to look like he was, turning a corner in his career. And that was a major pun, but regardless, Sam Hubbard, the injury news that came out this week about Sam Hubbard basically having a hamstring tear similar to what Dak Prescott had or has in Dallas. And he opted. There's a part of me that says, because we love Sam. Sam's been on our show a bunch of times. He's been nothing but cordial. He's awesome. We love the guy. He's been one of the better Bengal players really in their history, has one of the most iconic plays ever. Part of me says, warrior, awesome, way to play through it. Your team is shorthanded and you're a team, you've been a team captain, all that kind of stuff. Awesome. Part of me says, you know what? Maybe this does not help the team. But part of me is right in the middle of that and saying, Sam Hubbard may know the Bengals better than all of us do. And Sam Hubbard knows that if he goes out for the year, opts for that surgery, the Bengals will not do what is needed to find an ample replacement for him late in the process. So he may have had his hand. I don't want to speak for him. He may have had his hand forced a little bit like, hey, I'm doing this for the team and all this kind of stuff. And I don't think the team is going to make the moves necessary, especially in the wake of a Cam Sample injury. All the injuries on the interior of the defensive line. He may have not been confident in the team to do what it was necessary, what good teams do, which is restock the cabinet when the chips are down, when guys get injured, when you lose guys in free agency, etc.
It's crazy because there are teams that make moves when you don't even expect them to make the moves. They fortify a strength, and the Bengals, like you said, they can't even make the move to just repair a weakness when it inconveniences them, or when it's via a way and a methodology that they don't like to do, which would be, making an aggressive move right before the season or making a trade in the middle of the season, aside from trading for a running back that you've played, I think, a combined 5 snaps in 2 weeks right now. I think Khalil Herbert's basically a non-factor. It's another difference. And when things don't go according to plan, they kind of just sit on their hands and hope for the best. And that's why when Sam Hubbard missed the entirety of training camp in the preseason and Cam Sample was hurt and Miles Murphy was hurt, their answer was picking up KJ Henry, who played, like an average 10 snaps a game and then was signed off of the practice squad. And then you're basically back to ground zero. Lawrence Guy was another one who they brought in off of his couch after a workout, and he played a handful of weeks when you were down a bunch of defensive tackles at the time. They make moves for the sake of making moves, but they rarely do move the needle. And it's that lack of aggression and that lack of process that has continued to hinder them when things don't go their way. And obviously, injuries happen to every team, and how every team responds to that is different. But there's a big difference between the perennial contenders and the teams that people take seriously, and the Bengals, who just do some things, but just not enough.
So it's interesting you bring up kind of that bare minimum mentality. Andrew Woods here in our live YouTube chat says Brown family cares more about profits than building a good team. I don't know that I wholeheartedly believe that. I think they want to win. I think they want to find a way to win. I think there is an instilled philosophy from Paul Brown about players are never going to have the power over ownership. They're not going to dictate what happens. I mean, we've had guests on this show from years ago that talked about that. I do think they care about winning. I do think they love the game of football. I do think there are financial constraints that other teams and ownership groups do not have that they have to work with. I think they want to win. I think they want to put a quality product on the field, but I think it's two things. I think they want to do it on their terms, and they want to do it on within their financial constraints comparative to other teams. So, and then also there's maybe the element of, still, even with a Joe Burrow difference, some free agents, some others going, I don't want to go to Cincinnati, right? There's maybe that they're pushing that snowball up the hill, if you will. So I don't know that they don't. I've never been of the mindset that they don't care. I've seen Mike Brown do things. There's been some rumblings this weekend about Trey Hendrickson having some sort of issue that caused him to travel late to the game, and the Brown family accommodated him. We've seen them care for their players. We've seen them do things where you go, that's the mark of a great franchise. But still, there are so many other elements where you go, what are you doing? I think it's just a lack of, I don't know, competence in some ways, I guess.
Yeah, because it's a matter of not doing enough. And I mean, yeah, we've known this for forever, man. Like this is this is a team whose owner, initially rejected the idea of free agency in the first place, 30 years ago. It was fighting tooth and nail just to get to some baseline level of ability to attract free agents in the first place. And then as someone who's met the Browns, I've never once thought that they didn't care about winning, but you have to get out of your own way and you have to evolve your process in order to do the things required to do so in the year of our Lord 2024. Look at what other teams are doing, man. Like you're trying to win like it's 1996. It's not the 90s anymore, and you sucked crap in the 90s. So what good did that do you anyways? It's the lack of evolution that has still yet to have happened, despite all the things relatively that they've done in recent years compared to before this era of Bengals football. It's not a matter of caring. It's not a matter of humanity. It's a matter of just stubbornness and the fact that this ownership family, this team is all they have, and that's why they're not going to sell, and that's why we can't live in this idea of, oh, if the Browns just sell the team, then maybe the Bengals can evolve. That's just not going to happen. This is the sandbox that they are, and it's just a matter. It's just like anything in life. When you feel like some progress has been made, it's never enough. There's always more. There's always more battles to win, and you have to slowly pick at it, and you have to find the right people to put those ideas and words into their minds in order for that level of progress to be made. It's never going to be what it should be necessarily with this team, and I don't think it's going to change once the next generation takes over, because the next generation has been trained by the previous generation, and that's just how that goes. But there's always more battles that you can win to get to that point. But selling the team and changing ownership families, that's never going to happen.
Never. It will never happen. The only thing that will happen is if they expand. It's funny to me because Robert Kraft and Mike Brown are apparently pretty good friends or pretty close. That's our guy, Jeff Hobson, has reported that before. I know Mike Brown has marveled at, and this is kind of one of the reasons why Marvin Lewis stuck around for as long as he did. He has marveled at the continuity aspect of the Steelers. Their coach, it's been 3 coaches since the 1950s, something like that. For the Steelers. It's silly. It's silly, right? And so Mike Brown, is like in awe of that kind of stuff, and these championship pedigrees. Yet you have a small scouting staff still, even with additions. It's these things where you go, we're not talking about it when you're winning the games in 21 and 22 and beating the big teams, and you got the good, the all-world quarterback, etc. But you're talking about it in a year full of disappointments and a year full of, how did this team get so far away from where they were just 2 years ago, 3 years ago? How did they get so far away from that? And again, this is not going to be, hey, we're going to add in more ownership people. They've brought in the other, sponsors for the stadium and all that, the naming rights and all that kind of stuff to get a little extra monetary help. But what it's going to take is them, again, just kind of slowly going the way of the Buffalo, and we got to add more scouts. We got to do things this way. And this is where I point out again, the Steelers and the Ravens. You face these teams twice a year, every year. The owners. You've apparently been enamored with the Steelers process. Why are you not carbon copying what that team is doing from top to bottom. That's a family-owned team. Why are you not carbon copying every layer and say this? That's you can admit it. That's a model of success. Whoever Paul Brown was and is, he's an icon in the sport. Why are you not saying, you know what, we're gonna family legacy, Paul Brown legacy is amazing as it is, but what the Steelers are doing, what the Ravens are doing, we need to go every lockstep way in order to be that championship style of team. And it hasn't happened.
Yeah. We've talked a lot of big picture stuff today, and I feel like it's important, at least for people to know why, because not only are these types of games continuing to happen, but I feel like I need to reiterate just kind of what I was thinking last night. Like it feels like all of the progress that the team has made in the last 6 years under this regime has basically been whittled away. And there are still pieces on the team that obviously you can build around. Like Chase isn't going anywhere, Burrow isn't going anywhere. There's a handful of other pieces that you can build towards the future. And that process really does start now. But again, like if you're going to talk about where to go from here and how to move on from this, I think the first step of that is to recognize where they are now. And in my opinion, they are pretty much back to where they started, with a different talent base and with slightly more promise in terms of having some pieces that matter. But all of the progress that you made towards getting to the postseason and building a winning culture, it just looks like it's not there anymore. And that's why I think you have to have these conversations about where to go from here, because I think running it back at this point is just not really an option.
And last night, the Ravens losses this year, the one scored, and you know, yeah, I guess you could call 21-22 a flash in the pan, so to speak. Last night, though, is a symptom of this is what we're getting at. It's a symptom of a larger problem.
Yeah.
It is a symptom of a larger problem, and the Bengals slowly address parts of it, but do not address all of it. And that's what's maddening. You know, you say Chase is here, you say Joe's here. I'm with you. I don't want to be that guy, but there's more talk about Carson Palmer now. You can bring up Carl Pickens. You can bring up Corey Dillon. You can bring up guys that at some point just get fed up. They get fed up with the expectations are Z, and your resources to get to Z are like R, right? I mean, so I can understand the frustrations a little bit, and we don't know the dynamics of a lot of those different players, but every team has players who get disgruntled for contracts and all kinds of different reasons. I hope that's not what's ahead for the Bengals. Anyway, the Bengals lose a heartbreaker. They made a valiant effort coming back and you know, almost getting that one from the Chargers, but just mistakes. And, you know, you can point at coaching, you can point at the defense, you can point at lack of talent, you can point at other things. And before we get out of here and drop the mic and everything, let's do the injury latest. We talked about the Sam Hubbard injury. He kind of claims he's feeling a lot better now after some rest and kind of building the strength back up. I would not be surprised if there's some sort of procedure done after the end of the season here, or if the Bengals season kind of starts to continue to torpedo, maybe even before that, maybe he shuts down before that. But, you know, it's admirable that he wants to play through that hamstring tear apparently. But, you know, with the Bengals, high volume snap early in the season and all that, you know, all that kind of stuff, you go, what are we doing here? But then, of course, John, DJ Turner looks like he may have broken his clavicle and might be out for the rest of the year.
It's so heartbreaking, considering this was a battle between Dax Hill and DJ Turner all off season, and Dax made so much progress at a role that he wasn't expected necessarily by everyone to win. And then he goes down in the middle of the season, and then DJ Turner, who lost that battle, goes back into the starting lineup, and by all accounts, over the past few weeks, has been one of the few bright spots on this defense. He's really coming into his form, and he makes one of the best plays that I've ever seen him make on the ball, and then he gets injured, and now he's out for the year. And now you have two of your best cornerbacks are now done, and my God, man, Cam Taylor-Britt's season is going to be documented as the craziest, most roller coaster season of all time, from being on such a high after week 2, intercepting Patrick Mahomes, to now being benched twice and now being brought back to the field because you need to. Like, this game started with Taylor Britt basically on his last chance with DJ Turner, and then it ended up being DJ Turner and Josh Newton, who looked really good in this first time playing extended snaps. And now it's probably going to be Cam Taylor Britt back on the field again because they don't have a choice with Josh Newton now playing for DJ Turner. And your depth there is just, it's DJ Ivy. It could be a practice squad elevation here too. They have like 3 on the practice squad right now, but my God, dude, like their 2 best cornerbacks are done. And it's just a position that has been hammered with injuries over the past few years, and it's just not going away.
It's not. And so you got, Taylor Britt and Josh Newton out there that'll probably be, manning those quarter spots. Obviously, Cam Taylor Britt was benched last night. Turner was, making some nice strides and just, unfortunate sequence of events. But again, this is kind of it goes back to the last topic we were hammering on for a lot, which was aggressiveness as a franchise, your process, your scouting department, your development process, everything. These are the types of things, unfortunately, that cause you to question your entire process. And, it feels sometimes, God bless the Bengals. And like you said, there's some great people involved in that ownership group. There's some good hearts and everything, but it feels like there's either a willing ignorance or a false sense of confidence in the process that, and we're dummies behind microphones and in front of computer screens, right? I mean, we're not GMs here, but I mean, I think there are some things that you can point out and say there are some innate, deficiencies in the process. And unfortunately, when your season goes this way, it's easy to point that out. All right, let's get on out of here, John. I know we've got a lot going on and everything. So what do you got for us?
I know there was someone who asked, it was Andrew Woods who asked what the percentage of Burrow getting pressure compared to Herbert. I just wanted to answer that before we got out of here. Justin Herbert was pressured on 16% of his dropbacks, only 7 of them last night, compared to Joe Burrow, who was pressured, I'm not stuttering here, 25 dropbacks for 44%.
40%, yeah.
And I believe it was hit around a dozen times or so, and each one of them looked more painful than the last. So I just wanted to answer that question for you, Andrew.
And that is an indictment, again, of the outside in versus inside out building of your team, and how you can look at this team since 2020, and see what has happened in Joe Burrow's career. Joe Burrow plays a particular style of play where he's going to take hits and sacks, etc. We know that, but where you just do not put together, how do we find the best offensive line coach? How do we develop the talent the best way? How do we? I don't get it. I'm going to go a little bit lighter on this. There was a little bit. Despite the second half being pretty fun to watch yesterday, I had a pretty cool moment this weekend. This was me, and we've tried to get this guy on our show a bit, and it has not happened, but was able to meet the GOAT, Corey Dillon, this weekend. My kids, I tried to explain to my oldest, who the guy was, and but I actually didn't want to be in the picture. My wife kind of was like, "Hey, get in the picture." And I was like, "I just want the kids to take a picture with him." But he was very cordial. He was at a local establishment with Robert Banker, if you know him. I think he works with Joe Goodberry on some things, and some other fan initiatives. But got to meet Corey Dillon. He was just yucking it up with fans. I think he was pretty stoked that fans were, "Hey, Corey." So pretty cool moment, and that was something where I was like, "Hey, this is pretty neat." Bengal Jim was there, which was awesome. A couple other folks were there that I recognized, and just a cool arrangement of things. And it was very cool of Corey Dillon to take a picture with my kids and me too. I promise you, I did not want to climb in there, but I was forced, John Sheeran. I was forced.
You're pulling off a fit there too. Like that jacket was pretty nice. It was worthy.
It's the old starter. The starter. Yeah. Anyway, cool guy, and stoked for him. And I just, made sure to congratulate him on the Ring of Honor. And he was very gracious. I think, again, it's a really cool thing to see him and where that relationship between the fans, and the team is. By the way, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there were some high-tech cameras and stuff in this event. I believe Robert told me that those were from the actual official team, that they were going to kind of post some of that stuff on maybe their YouTube channel and stuff. I haven't looked to see if they've done that, but keep an eye out for that. I don't no promises there, but they were going to do fan chants and all kinds of stuff. I had to leave early. It was a restaurant, but it was a bar, and I had the kids were welcome and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I gotta get my kids to bed. It's getting late. So at any rate, I didn't drag my kids to a bar just to let everybody know it was a restaurant. They had pizza. I mean, it was fine.
Sure,
for
dude.
kids, I know. Father of the year, right? Anyway, it was nice meeting him, and hopefully we can get him on the show sometime soon. But it was a lot of fun. John, thank you, buddy. Thanks for the patience with the wonky schedule and everything. I appreciate you, and I know, like I said, Mike that I met was complimentary of you, the show, etc., and that was pretty cool.
Hey man, no Bengals loss next Sunday. How about that?
Hey, there you go. That's a positive way to look at it. All right. Take care, John. Take care, everybody. Thanks for tuning in live. You can also get this show after the fact on your favorite audio streamer, through YouTube, through Cincy Jungle's Facebook, if you like the video side of things. Appreciate all of you. We've got a lot of people tuning in. Appreciate all of you tuning in live and after the fact. We appreciate you. Believe in Cincy is the podcast channel. Go subscribe. Leave us a review. Thanks.